It all began on a quiet Thursday evening. David pulled into his neighborhood after a long day at work. His driveway was temporarily blocked by construction materials. His garage was being repaired, and the workers had left equipment piled in front of it. Not wanting to make a scene, David parked his car in one of the open visitor spots near his home. It was late, the space was empty, and he figured it was harmless. The next morning, when he opened his front door, his heart sank. A bright yellow notice was taped to his windshield. The words printed across the page felt like a punch in the chest. Asterisk, unauthorized parking, $200 fine. Asterisk. David shook his head in disbelief. $200? For parking in a visitor spot? That's insane. He tore the notice from his windshield, muttering to himself. It was empty, no one needed it, and it's not even marked as reserved. Later that evening, he vented to his wife. Can you believe this? They fined me for parking in an open space that literally no one was using. His wife frowned. This HOA is out of control. First it was lawns, then decorations, and now they're going after where people park. The next day, David decided to check if anyone else had faced the same issue. He didn't have to look far. His neighbor, Maria, was outside watering her flowers when David approached. Hey Maria, did you ever get fined for parking? He asked. Maria let out a bitter laugh. Oh yes, last month my sister visited, and they ticketed her car for parking in front of my house. They said guests need to register online in advance. She was here for 2 hours. 2 hours, David. As word spread, more stories surfaced. Mr. and Mrs. Lee, who lived a few houses down, had been fined multiple times because their teenage son parked his car near the sidewalk. The HOA claimed it was too close and could block pedestrians, even though there was plenty of space. Another resident, an elderly man named George, had been threatened with legal action for parking his truck in his own driveway because part of the rear bumper extended slightly over the sidewalk. But the worst story came from Sarah, a single mom who used a handicap placard for her car. She had parked in a visitor spot close to her apartment so she wouldn't have to walk far with groceries. The HOA slapped her with a notice, claiming she hadn't filed paperwork to use the spot. Her voice trembled as she told David, "They don't care that I'm disabled. To them, I'm just another fee." The anger in the neighborhood grew. People began referring to the situation as the asterisk parking spot war. Asterisk, what should have been simple, a place to leave your car, had turned into a battlefield of rules, fines, and frustration. David decided he'd had enough. He began collecting stories from his neighbors, keeping copies of all their notices and fines. He created a folder filled with evidence, pictures of empty spaces, copies of tickets, and testimonies from residents. The more he gathered, the clearer it became that the HOA wasn't trying to protect order. They were trying to profit. When the next HOA board meeting arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Dozens of residents showed up, their faces filled with frustration and determination. At the front of the room sat the HOA board, led by Mr. Stevens, the same stern president who had caused chaos during the lawn dispute. He banged his gavel to start the meeting. "We are here to maintain order," he announced. "Parking violations are a serious matter, and fines are necessary to protect property values." David stood up, holding the yellow notice in his hand. His voice carried through the room. $200 for parking in an empty visitor spot? That's not order, that's extortion. The room erupted in murmurs of agreement. Mr. Stevens glared. "The rules are clear. Visitor spots are for registered guests only." David's tone sharpened. "What about Maria's sister? She was here for 2 hours. What about Sarah, who's disabled? What about George, whose bumper barely crossed the line? You're punishing people for living their lives. That's not order. That's abuse." The crowd erupted in applause. Maria stood and added, "This isn't about rules. This is about control. You're turning neighbors against each other. You're making us afraid to even park in front of our own homes." Another resident shouted, "You're using us like ATMs. Every little thing is another fine." Mr. Stevens slammed his gavel. "Order, order." But the people weren't listening anymore. They had found their voice. David pulled out his folder and began reading each case aloud. Mr. and Mrs. Lee, fined for their son's car near the sidewalk. George, threatened for his truck in his own driveway. Sarah, fined while using a handicap placard. Me, fined $200 for using an empty visitor spot. How many more stories do you need before you admit this is wrong? The board members exchanged nervous glances. Mr. Stevens sputtered, We are enforcing the bylaws. David's voice thundered in response. Then the bylaws need to change. We are the homeowners. We pay the fees. This is our community, not your kingdom. The room erupted in chants. Asterisk, change the rules. Change the rules. Change the rules. Asterisk. One board member, clearly shaken, whispered something to Mr. Stevens. Finally, Stevens relented. His face red with frustration. He announced, The board will review the parking policies. We will consider adjustments. Cheers filled the room. People hugged, clapped, and celebrated. For the first time in months, the homeowners felt like they had won. In the days that followed, the HOA rolled back many of its harsh policies. Visitor parking no longer required pre-approval. Minor infractions were dismissed, and residents were allowed to park in front of their own homes without fear of punishment. The tension in the neighborhood eased, and life slowly returned to normal. One evening, David walked outside and saw Maria's sister parking her car in front of the house, smiling as she stepped out without fear of a ticket. He saw Sarah carrying groceries from her car parked near her building, relief on her face. He saw kids riding bikes around George's truck without issue. His wife joined him on the porch. You did it, she said softly. David smiled. No, he replied. We all did it. We reminded them that rules exist for people, not the other way around. The narrator's voice closed the story. HOAs were created to bring order and beauty to communities. But when rules become weapons, they destroy the very harmony they claim to protect. Sometimes, it takes ordinary people standing together to remind those in power what community really means. This was not just a fight over parking spots. This was a fight for respect, for fairness, and for the right to live without fear in your own home. On the screen, bold words appeared. Asterisk HOA tried to fine families for parking, but the people fought back. Asterisk